Let me clear my throat.
All right, everybody, here we go. I'm just kidding.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We're actually doing a part 2 to the MMORPG list. Today actually has a little bit of extra inspiration from a lit RPG book that I read. If you guys don't know what a lit RPG book is, that's just an MMO superimposed onto a book. So that's where our inspiration is coming from today, and let's get into it.
Yes. Also, pardon me, I've been sick for a little while, dealing with Alex all the time. No, I'm just kidding. But sorry if I sound a little silly. So, so let's get right into this. So one of the big things that you'll see in a lot of RPGs before we get into the whole lit RPG thing is faction reputation, right? You see it in a lot of video games like Fallout, where you actually can be friends with maybe like the raiders, but that makes you enemies with the settlers and, you know, things like that. Or I haven't personally played a lot of World of Warcraft. Sorry for anyone that hates me now. But I know there's a system like that in WoW too.
Yeah, honestly, you can get negative reputation in World of Warcraft, or you can even get all the way up to like exalted, which is basically like royalty in said faction.
Yeah, so that kind of brings us to the idea, like how could maybe you translate this to a tabletop role-playing game like D&D or Pathfinder or whatever. And maybe, like you just said, with WoW, maybe you can have actual like tiers of status with the factions in your game. So obviously, like a quick way to think of something like that would be if you're helping the queen of some town and her guards, maybe you'll get some perks to that. Like you'll be kind of like, people in the town will view you like royalty. So they'll treat you differently and maybe you'll get some special treatment because of that.
And in general, most of the time when you're trying to, let's say, apply to a faction, you're just looking to gain the resources that they're already good at or kind of export in the beginning. So if you were going to go to like the Queen's Palace, right, and she exports like a bunch of hay and other kinds of supplies for like bakers, then you're probably going to end up getting a food or like a bakery pass or some kind of thing that's related to what they do. And you're probably going to want to make sure you gain reputation with people who like make weapons and magic. But in that regard, you could go for the baker's license.
Yeah, if you prefer bread over weapons and spell books, you can play D&D how you want. So so yeah, there would be some direct and apparent bonuses to these kinds of things, or repercussions. Like maybe you end up actually helping and becoming friends with like the underground crime boss, and then there's going to be some repercussions when the queen might realize that you've got some interesting power in the town that they didn't grant to you, so that might be an issue.
Right. And a lot of factions end up popping up in just different forms of like family names, like the crap. What are the hillbillies? What are the hillbillies on each side? The like Jenkins or
I'm from what?
the Beverly Hillbillies.
Oh crap! I've never watched it. I've never watched a shoot.
I wish I knew how to reference this noble feud right now.
All right, a feud of the highest folk.
Yes. All right. But more or less, when factions pop up in a city, it's usually just family names. So let's say the McGillicuddies are fighting the McDoyles.
You've got an Irish feud on your hands.
Yeah, exactly. And you didn't realize you were in a dwarven city.
I get it.
But really, though, with those kinds of factions, they would end up having a power over something, and that's why they're raised up to a higher status, and you'd be able to use or exploit that power against them. And oftentimes with factions, if you join the McGillicuddies, you're probably going to be hated by the McDoyles.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole matter of balance. So if you are going to really dive into running factions in your D&D game more than you already do, an easy way to keep the balance is if there's a powerful faction, there's going to be a faction somewhere on the other side of that, on the other side of the scale, that kind of balances that out. So you've got the underground crime boss and the queen that's a regal queen of the town. Or if there's a town with a lot of wealth, there's gonna be a faction of bandits on the outside trying to get to that wealth somehow. Easy way to keep the factions balanced and to make more factions in your game.
The next thing you might see in MMOs that you could actually bring to your game is going to be PvP. And I know a lot of people have talked about this before, but we're going to talk about it now. And of course, you need to make sure everyone's okay with PvP at the table. And for PvP, even when everyone says they're okay with it at the table, it can still end up pretty toxic if there's not a couple of ground rules.
Yes, for sure. You're definitely going to want to build some sort of system that works for all the players, because you're right. If you don't, it's a direct avenue to toxicity among the players. And that's definitely something you never want at your table. So.
100%. And let's be honest, Wizards of the Coast doesn't worry about balancing their classes. So if you were going to worry about that in a PvP situation, you're going to have all of your hair pulled out.
I thought for sure you were going to say Wizards of the Coast doesn't care about going against the players. Oh, good. So if you were going to dive into PvP in your games, maybe one of the ways you could do it is actually to find a way to set up non-lethal PvP. So just like simply like sparring matches where the players don't die, but maybe when they hit 0 hit points, they're just done with the fight and they can rest from there. Or maybe you can find some setup with like some, maybe like a hag that like kind of puts your players, jacks them straight into the matrix of their dreams, and they can fight that way without actually physically dying. Whatever else you can come up with.
100%. So like in the book that I mentioned earlier, there's this thing called a Mirage Chamber. And in the Mirage Chamber, you're just sitting there kind of like in a meditative state, and your consciousness is projected into this PvP arena where you can just go nuts, stab, kill, slash, behead people, but you're still gonna pop up back in your own body. It's literally like jacking straight into the Matrix.
For real. So if you set up some situation for your players to engage in combat with each other, but you might want to find ways to maybe communicate with your players too, to not really have instant win conditions and have some more way of like just like a slugfest or a display of skill between the two.
Right. Because it would be way cooler if your wizard was like thunderclapping and doing a bunch of other things instead of just sending your barbarian to a different dimension and now he wins in 30 seconds.
Right. Because then it's just not fun.
Right. Next up on the list is going to be monster cores. This is kind of something that is in a few different kinds of video games or different kinds of books. The monster core is essentially just going to be like a battery or like a soul battery, something that contains the essence of the monster. And sometimes you have to physically steal the soul, or sometimes it just drops on the monster's death.
Right. Of course, without reading the book, the first thing I think of with this concept is definitely the whole, you know, in Skyrim, you kill a dragon, you're the Dragonborn, you absorb the dragon's souls as a type of like currency that makes you stronger. That is arguably the most popular thing that might represent this well, but I know there's like the Ninja Gaiden series. I know that when you kill enemies there, you collect some currency from them. I don't remember exactly, but it's like their soul, but it's what makes you stronger and makes you level up and stuff.
Yeah, there's Dark Souls too.
Yeah, exactly. And Dark Souls. Perfect. Yeah. So really it's just like enemy dies, you get XP. So one of the cool ideas with this, if you were to use this in a D&D game, you could use this as actual XP level up flavoring. So maybe when you kill monsters, they do have some sort of monster core or like XP crystals, instead of just like, you know, okay, well, you beat the medium encounter I set up for you, which is 1200 XP. It's like you beat the monster, and as they fall, they drop this ominous looking crystal that you pick up, and as you pick it up, it's absorbed into your body. It's like actual, you know, XP level crystals or something.
Right. And that could be a really easy way to segue into, maybe you don't want the XP at this time. Maybe you're broke as all can be, and you just need to sell that XP crystal to the merchant. And you know for a fact it's always in demand because there are so many uses for this soul battery.
That is awesome. And it could be that the soul battery is even used for magic or like smithing. You can make specific weapons using these specific crystals. enchantments, alchemy, item upgrades, whatever you can think of with it.
And if you did want to look at it as maybe a shortcut to power, as the rich would be able to afford more of these than the poor, it might even be seen as a shortcut to longevity of life, because the more powerful you are in D&D, oftentimes you're going to end up living a couple extra 100 years because of it.
Yeah, I know you mentioned earlier that technically the way the lore is written for monks, even once you get like maxed out level, you're immortal.
Yeah.
Literally. You just stop aging.
Yeah, I don't even think you can die from like old age. You'll just like have to like take yourself out.
Yep. You're the only knife strong enough to take you out.
And the next thing we're going to be talking about is soul coins. These are really, really cool, and a part of the book that I was talking about earlier. It's He Who Fights with Monsters, by the way, if I hadn't said that. But what soul coins do is it gives you a burst of your full power. So let's just say you're a level 5 fighter and you really need to get through a really difficult challenge. You'd be able to get back to max strength from almost exhausted from that specific instance. Almost like granting yourself an instance of advantage.
That's very interesting. This is going way off script, but that's okay. One of the things I just thought about with that idea is what if you could put this in the game as an alternative to potions that are way overpowered. So let's say like you throw an insanely deadly encounter at your players, and if they have a couple soul coins, they could just like pop those things or use them however they want to literally gain the benefits of like a long rest right there in the middle of the fight.
Yeah.
That would be crazy, because you could send like insane encounters against your players if you knew that they had these in their back pocket.
Okay, so outside of combat, in the book, people can just like straight up eat, like I'm a copper level person, right? I can just straight up eat a copper level coin and I'm good for the rest of the day. I don't need to eat, sleep, nothing.
Oh, okay.
So like out of combat, it's just like, oh, okay, now I'm good.
There you go. So the people that don't like to track rations, maybe you could find a way, your rations are actually a copper soul coin. Yeah, you could do a lot of interesting things to kind of translate this to the tabletop instead, for sure.
Oh, 100%. A thing about soul coins is they come in many different shapes and sizes. Usually you'd be able to find soul coins all the way to a copper, all the way up to a platinum in the book that I'm talking about. But if you were going to use it for D&D, you might want to make sure that it's always a platinum, because it should cost something to be able to give yourself advantage. And in reality, you shouldn't be able to abuse this system either. So you should also gain at least 1 level of exhaustion every time you use a soul coin.
That would be pretty sweet. That way, if they know they're in the middle of a fight, they need to make a few really strong moves really quick, they might be able to make that sacrifice where they have 1, 2, 3 and get 3 levels of exhaustion right there. It's risky, but it'd be kind of awesome, right?
And it's not really fair that the barbarian's the only one exhausted after every fight.
Yeah, for real.
And then another aspect about lit RPG books that I have found super interesting is dungeon cores. It's almost a genre all on its own, but my favorite is the Dungeon Core series wrote by Dakota Kraut. If you check this out, a dungeon core is basically a sentient dungeon, and at the end of the dungeon you'd be able to find the core that's able to control the entire dungeon. And let's just say you cleared the dungeon. This time you don't find the core, you go through and continue your adventure. You come back about a week later and then the dungeon is completely different and you don't know what happened. That's a dungeon core for you. And if you wanted to make it even cooler, a more powerful dungeon core would be able to change the dungeon as you're going through it. You were really, really good at that goblin room, maybe a room or 2 back. Well, now you have to deal with this puzzle. You're really good at the puzzles? Well, now we're in the bottom of a lake. It could just be as crazy as you wanted it to be.
That's an awesome idea. And it's definitely, I can already see right out the gate that it would definitely be an extra hand for the DM to adjust on the fly, which would be something you have to be careful with. Like, you don't want it to be cheap or feel bad at the table. But if you're careful about it and you know how your players think and stuff like that, this really could be something you adjust your dungeon on the fly, like maybe in the middle of their encounter with the goblins and they're crushing the goblins. Absolutely out of nowhere, there's a torrential flood in that room. It's like, what's going on? But the dungeon's just reacting to failing to beat the players.
Oh, 100%. And I kind of see that as like, let's just say you walk in to like the arena where all the goblins are at, and you just throw down like 6 of them, and all of a sudden you hear a gong beating, and the just giant goblin starts to walk in the room.
Yep. That'd be pretty awesome. So yeah, it'd be an easy way to adjust your dungeon for the players as you're going through it. But again, it'd be something you want to make sure your players would enjoy and this doesn't feel cheap.
Yeah. To make it something that fits in your world really well, you could reiterate the fact that it is literally a sentient being and your players are here to challenge it, steal it, maybe use it as like the monster cores that we discussed earlier. What if it was like a whole half a level by just getting a single dungeon core?
That would be pretty sweet.
Yeah. Or maybe they take the dungeon core back to their base, and now their base is the start of the new dungeon.
Yes. So another thing I just thought about with that is, what if there was a puzzle room that, as it kind of like adjusts as the players are solving it,
Right.
and it makes it so that when the puzzle is solved, instead of opening the door, the solution to the puzzle literally creates traps in the room or something crazy like that.
Yes.
That'd be cool.
Oh, I think so. There's so many different kinds of cool puzzles that I've kind of wanted to talk about as well. So that might be a video that we do in the future.
I could definitely dive into that for sure. So
I've literally always wanted to make the world's simplest puzzle, but like as soon as they figure it out, it just doesn't work. And like the puzzle wasn't necessary at all, but they figured it out because it was there.
that'd be interesting. So that's all the ideas we have from that genre of thinking and translating that to D&D. We have made one video like this in the past as well. If you wanted to check that out, we can put that in the description below. But if you like this, then please do leave a like, comment, or subscribe. And we mentioned a few videos through this, so if you like any of the ideas that we mentioned, feel free to comment that below too, and we'll make sure to do those ones first and sink time into that. But other than that, thanks so much for sticking around, and we will see you in the next video. See ya. Bye-bye.